Connor stumbled upon a secret that would turn his world upside down. His father and his teacher, together in the school's closet. Battling a whirlwind of emotions and torn between loyalty to his mother and the shock of his father's actions, Connor chose a path far from confrontation or confession. What Connor decided to do next is going to surprise you. "Connor, wait!" his father yelled as he ran after his son, still buttoning his shirt. It's not what you think. Connor may have been a young boy, but he knew exactly what he saw. He had tears in his eyes, unable to express what he was feeling in words. "Miss Valenko!" he yelled with his hands up in the air. "Why, Dad?" He had never seen his father this bewildered before. The usually stoic, strong, and confident man looked at his son as if his life depended on it. He didn't know what to say, what not to say, or if he should say anything at all. "Please don't tell your mother," Connor's father eventually sighed. How dare he ask that of his son? But even though this was the most confusing situation Connor had ever been in, he knew he couldn't let his father get away with this. He promised his father he wouldn't tell his mother, but they didn't specify any other details. But was his father actually cheating? Will Connor inform his mother about this? Or what else would he do if not? Connor's family was a little different from the rest. His father was a retired military officer, not because of his age, but because he got injured and did most of the housework. His mother, on the other hand, worked full-time to pay the bills. It was like their living situation was turned around, but it didn't bother any of them. Connor's father, Stephen, dropped his son off at school every morning and picked him up afterward. They were like an oiled machine, and everything seemed to be going great. There had been a little tension between his parents, but not that Connor really noticed. His parents made sure of that. But the truth ought to come out someday, and that day was coming sooner rather than later. Miss Valenko was a beautiful young woman, fresh out of college, and had been Connor's teacher for the last year. It was the end of the school year, and all the parents had to come by her office to discuss their children's report cards. Stephen had tried desperately to find a sitter for Connor, as his mother was working late, but he couldn't find one. Connor didn't understand why his father wanted him to stay home so badly. He could easily play on the playground for a little bit. But back then, Connor had no idea what he would be walking into. After playing for about half an hour, Connor got bored, and he wanted to know how long it would be until they went home. When he walked into an empty classroom, he was stunned. "Dad?" he confusedly called out, but no one answered. He heard stumbling sounds coming from Miss Valenko's closet, so he thought she was in there looking for something. But when he went to ask her where his father was, he saw them undressing each other in a hurry while making out. "Dad!" Connor yelled, now full of shock and disbelief. His father looked up in shock, all the color drained from his face. "Connor, what are you doing here?" he stammered, as he pushed himself off Miss Valenko. Connor took a few steps backward and stumbled into a desk before he ran out of the classroom to catch some air outside. His father ran after him, zipping up his pants and buttoning his shirt while doing so. "Connor, wait!" he yelled as Connor burst through the school doors. It felt like his world was spinning and all the air was pressing down on him. "It's not what you think, Con," his father said, out of breath. But how could it not? Connor knew what he had seen. The two of them stood there for a moment, breathing heavily and trying to understand the situation. Then his father suddenly muttered something. Please don't tell your mother," he sighed. Connor didn't know what to say. How could he ask that of his son? All Connor could feel was anger and betrayal, and he wanted nothing more than to tell his mother. But as he looked at his father, tears in his eyes and a look on his face he had never seen before, he began to feel sorry for him. Connor knew his father didn't deserve his sympathy, but he was still his father. So he promised not to tell his mother. But little did his father know Connor had something else in mind that would change their family forever. The car ride home felt like they were traveling through a void. with Stephen's glances filled with regret, and Connor's eyes locked on the passing scenery, a storm brewing in his silence. Words were lost in the space between them, an invisible wall that neither knew how to break. Stephen's attempts at conversation evaporated before they could form, leaving the air heavy with unspoken apologies and anger. Coming home felt different now. Connor dashed to his room, bypassing the usual hug for his mom. She noticed, her maternal instincts on high alert. "Connor," she called, only to be met with the echo of his bedroom door. Her puzzled look was a silent question to Stephen, who was left navigating a sea of lies and half-truths, wondering how to keep the peace without revealing the storm brewing beneath. In the kitchen, worry painted her face as she questioned, "Oh God, is he failing school?" Stephen's heart skipped, knowing the truth was far heavier than academic troubles. "No, it's not that," he reassured, mustering a smile. "Just a small scuffle with another kid. I've sorted it." His lie, a flimsy shield against the questions he hoped would never come, felt like a betrayal to both his son and his wife. Their evening proceeded under the guise of normalcy, with dinner conversations skirting around the edges of the day's events. Connor's quiet nods and half-hearted smiles did little to ease the tension. Stephen found himself recounting tales of mundane office politics, a desperate attempt to fill the silence. As they cleared the table, the unspoken hung heavily in the air, a reminder of the fragile peace that now held their family together. Connor sat on his bed, knees pulled up to his chest, staring at the wall. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, trying to figure out how to break the news to his mom without causing a nuclear family meltdown. Ideas came and went like waves, but none seemed right. He knew he needed a different perspective, someone who could help him navigate this mess. The next morning, Connor decided it was time to get some advice from the one person he trusted most outside his family, Max. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed someone else to weigh in, to tell him if he was overreacting or if his plan was just plain dumb. The solution wasn't going to come from brooding alone. It was time to bring in reinforcements. With determination, Connor left his room, brushing past his parents with a quick, "Going to Max's back after dinner," thrown over his shoulder. He barely registered their responses, his focus laser-sharp on getting out of the house. His dad's attempt to talk halted with a look from Connor, a silent message that now was not the time. Max lived just a hop, skip, and a jump away, making him not just a best friend, but practically family. Connor's parents never worried about him going over there, even if it meant coming back home when the stars were out. It was a freedom Connor was grateful for, especially today, as he raced down the street, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and relief. Max's room was the epitome of teenage chaos, but to Connor, it was a haven. He spilled everything, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. Max listened, his expression shifting from disbelief to concern as Connor's story unfolded. Here, in this room filled with posters and scattered clothes, Connor found the first sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could somehow be set right. In Max's room, the air was thick with Connor's confession. Max, wide-eyed and shocked, could only hug his friend tightly, whispering reassurances. "I've got your back," he promised, the weight of Connor's secret solidifying their bond. Despite the messiness of the situation, Max's support was unwavering. Together, they felt a bit stronger, a little less lost in the face of the unknown. Sitting cross-legged on Max's bedroom floor, they brainstormed under a fortress of action figures and comic books. Their ideas were grand, but reality bit hard. They were just kids with limited means at their disposal. Yet, their determination didn't wane. Each suggestion, no matter how outlandish, was a testament to their commitment to setting things right, or at least, to trying. The clock ticked away, reminding Connor of home's call. They parted with a plan to reconvene at recess on Monday, their young minds buzzing with schemes. The promise of tomorrow's plotting under the sun brought a flicker of hope to Connor. School, once a place of routine learning, was now the battleground for their grand strategy, their secret mission that only they knew. Back home, Connor's routine was mechanical, his thoughts elsewhere. His mother's gentle knock on his door was a soft intrusion into his whirlwind of emotions. She entered, her presence a balm, yet also a reminder of what he was hiding. Her worry was palpable as she sat beside him, her touch warm on his cold cheek, a silent question hanging in the air. Connor's heart clenched as his mother's concern washed over him. Her hand on his cheek was a tether to reality, a reminder of the love that bound them. Tears threatened, emotions from the day pressing against his resolve. Yet, he held back the truth, fearing the rupture it would cause. In her presence, he found both solace and sorrow, the weight of his secret heavier than ever. The kitchen was alive with the aroma of bacon and pancakes on Monday morning, a feast laid out by Connor's dad in a silent bid for forgiveness. But Connor's stomach turned at the thought. The effort, while touching, felt like a band-aid over a gaping wound. With a mumbled excuse and a heart heavy with unspoken words, he left the warmth of the kitchen for the cool morning air. "I'm catching a ride with Max," Connor announced, barely pausing in his rush to escape the house. The idea of his dad anywhere near the school, near Missy Valenko, made his skin crawl. He couldn't risk the awkward encounters or the questions that might follow. With his backpack slung over one shoulder, he darted out, leaving his father's attempt at reconciliation unanswered. Seeing Miss Valenko again was like reopening a fresh wound. Connor found himself trapped in a classroom with the last person he wanted to see, struggling to focus on anything she said. The day dragged on, each lesson stretching into what felt like an eternity. Her presence was a constant reminder of the secret he was carrying, heavy and suffocating. Recess couldn't come soon enough for Connor. He and Max rendezvoused beneath the slide, a secluded spot away from prying eyes and ears. They huddled together, whispering fiercely, their heads bent over notes and ideas scattered between them. This was their war room, the place where they plotted their next move, desperate to find a solution that felt right. By the end of recess, after countless discarded ideas and whispered debates, they finally settled on a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was something, a course of action that felt like progress. They parted ways with a new sense of purpose, the weight of their secret mission bonding them even more deeply. They had a plan, and now all they needed was the courage to see it through. Since Max and Connor didn't share the same classroom, the schoolyard's final bell marked the beginning of their real work. Backpacks thrown aside, they huddled in Max's room, surrounded by scattered notes and whispered strategies. This was their time, the precious hours after school where they could pore over every detail of their plan, refining it, hoping it would bring the change they so desperately sought. Connor's absence at home became a regular occurrence, leaving his mother fraught with worry. She noticed the empty chair at dinner, the untouched bed some nights. Stephen, trying to keep the peace, reassured her that Connor was just blowing off steam, probably wrestling with growing pains or school stress. But a mother's intuition is not easily swayed, and her concern only deepened with each passing day. Unsettled by her son's behavior, Connor's mother took matters into her own hands. She visited Miss Valenko, hoping for some insight into her son's sudden change. Miss Valenko, caught off guard by the visit, fumbled through the conversation. Her awkwardness did not go unnoticed, adding another layer of suspicion to Connor's mother's already worried mind. The air was tense when Connor's mother returned home, the visit with Miss Valenko leaving her more puzzled than ever. Her interactions with the teacher had only added to her concerns, the awkwardness, she observed, sparking more questions than answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was being kept from her, and her resolve to uncover the truth only strengthened. Dinner was quiet until Connor's mother couldn't hold back any longer. "Please, Connor, talk to me," she pleaded, her voice heavy with worry. "I just want to help." The earnestness in her plea, the worry in her eyes, it all reached Connor in a way he hadn't expected. He felt the weight of the secret he carried, torn between the truth and the consequences of revealing it. As his mother's eyes sought the truth, Stephen's glance held a silent plea that Connor couldn't ignore. With a heavy heart, Connor spun a tale far from the truth, a lie that settled like a stone in his stomach. Each word twisted the knife of betrayal deeper, and with it, his resentment towards his father grew, a silent storm brewing between father and son. That night, the house was alive with the low hum of a brewing storm, voices rising and falling in the dark. Connor lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of his parents' disagreement, each word a confirmation of the rift between them. The soft click of the guest bedroom door echoed through the house, a silent testament to the distance that had grown overnight. The next morning brought with it a realization that shook Connor to his core. The distance between his parents wasn't new. It was an old wound, festering in silence. The revelation that his parents had been living more like roommates than lovers long before this crisis added layers of confusion and hurt. Connor felt like a stranger in his own home, blindsided by the reality of his family's facade. Connor's frustration boiled over as he witnessed his parents' act of normalcy in the kitchen. Their attempts to gloss over the tension with mundane tasks felt like a slap in the face. Without a word, he stormed upstairs, the need for space and air overwhelming. Clothes thrown on in haste, he fled the house, leaving behind the suffocating pretense of a family untroubled. This time, Connor didn't seek refuge at Max's. He needed solitude, a space to breathe and untangle the web of emotions that ensnared him. With every step away from his home, he grappled with feelings too complex for his young mind to fully understand. It was a journey without a destination, driven by a heart heavy with secrets and a yearning for something he couldn't quite name. As Connor stormed away, his mother's voice cut through the morning air, a desperate plea for him to stop. But Connor couldn't face her, not with the turmoil churning inside him. The distance between them grew with each step he took, and the silence that followed his mother's unheeded call added another layer of hurt to his already heavy heart. What Connor didn't see was the struggle behind closed doors. His mother, instincts kicking in, had grabbed her shoes, ready to chase after her son. But Stephen intervened, convincing her that giving Connor space was for the best. This moment of hesitation, meant to protect, only widened the gap between intention and action, leaving both parents grappling with the consequences of their decision. Driven by a maelstrom of feelings, Connor found himself at the school, the silence of its empty corridors echoing his inner turmoil. He scavenged for chalk, his hands shaking with a mix of anger and determination. The walls, once bland and unassuming, became his canvas, a tangible outlet for the pain and frustration that words could no longer contain. As Connor's chalk flew across the walls, his actions drew an audience. Children paused their games, parents whispered in hushed tones, all eyes on the boy who transformed his confusion and hurt into art. His movements were frenetic, each stroke a release of pent-up emotions, until the pain in his hands mirrored the ache in his heart. Among the onlookers, one parent recognized the depth of Connor's distress and knew his mother needed to be informed. With a heavy heart, they dialed her number, the weight of the situation pressing down. The call was a bridge between Connor's silent cry for help and his mother's unawareness, a lifeline thrown in the hope of mending a family teetering on the brink. Covered in chalk dust and the tracks of his tears, Connor sat hunched over on the ground, his small body shaking with sobs. The physical pain in his hands paled in comparison to the emotional release he felt. He had poured every ounce of his confusion, anger, and sadness onto the walls, a vivid testament to his inner turmoil, now laid bare for the world to see. In the midst of his turmoil, a gentle presence made itself known. one of the parents, touched by Connor's distress, approached him silently and wrapped him in a hug. Words were unnecessary, maybe even too much for the moment. This silent gesture of understanding and support offered Connor a glimmer of comfort, a brief respite from the chaos of his emotions. The sound of his parents' car pulling into the lot snapped Connor back to reality. The weight of his actions hit him all at once, and panic surged through his veins. He wished he could undo everything, erase the marks he had made, but the chalked words stood defiant against his regrets. The fear of facing his parents, of explaining his pain and anger, overwhelmed him. Heart racing, Connor scrambled to his feet, desperate to wipe away the evidence of his emotional outpouring. He rubbed frantically at the chalk, but the brick wall was unforgiving. Pain shot through his already sore hands, forcing him to stop. Tears blurred his vision as he realized the futility of his efforts, the marks too stubborn, his actions irreversible. Just as Connor reached his breaking point, his mother was there, pulling him into a tight hug. She had rushed over, driven by a maternal instinct that told her her child needed her, though she hadn't yet seen the cause of his distress. In her embrace, Connor found a momentary haven, his panic subsiding slightly in the warmth of her unconditional love. Stephen approached with a pace that hesitated with each step, his eyes locked onto the wall that now held his family's turmoil for all to see. Connor's mother, following his gaze, gasped at the sight. The chalked words and crude drawing became a stark, unmissable declaration of pain and anger. The playground, once filled with the carefree laughter of children, stood silent, bearing witness to a family's breaking point. "Miss Valenko, the homewrecker!" screamed the wall in capital letters, with a crudely drawn gesture that left nothing to the imagination. The words, a manifestation of Connor's hurt, seemed to echo off the school walls, reaching deep into the core of their family's facade. Stephen's face drained of color, his guilt and shock palpable, as his wife's eyes met his, filled with a mix of disbelief and hurt. In the tense silence that followed, Stephen's complexion matched the white of the ghost, a visual representation of the shock and shame that gripped him. The glance exchanged between him and his wife was loaded with years of unsaid words, disappointments, and now, undeniable betrayal. The air was thick with tension, a silent standoff between guilt and heartbreak. With a resolve that surprised even herself, Connor's mother took her son by the hand and led him to their car. She didn't utter a word to Stephen, who remained frozen on the playground, left to face the consequences of his actions alone. The drive home was silent, a space for both of them to process the emotional turmoil of the day, the physical distance from the playground slowly putting a barrier between them and the ordeal. Once home, the bathwater ran gently, a soothing contrast to the day's harsh realities. Connor's mother bathed him, washing away the chalk and the day's events with equal care. She reassured him, her voice soft but firm, telling him he wasn't to blame for the chaos of grown-up mistakes. In that warm, enveloping water, Connor found a semblance of peace, his mother's love a balm to his troubled heart. After the bath, with Connor wrapped in a warm towel, his mother sat him down. She took a deep breath and shared a truth Connor had never known. "Your dad and we've been sleeping in separate rooms for a while," she confessed gently. She wanted to shield him from this adult complexity, wishing to preserve his childhood innocence just a little longer. She continued, her voice steady but filled with a sorrow that Connor could feel. "We decided to part ways months ago, but we chose to stay under the same roof, thinking it would be better for you." This revelation painted the past months in a starkly different light, explaining the silent shifts and unspoken tensions that Connor had felt but couldn't name. Hearing about his parents' breakup hit Connor like a wave, pulling him under a sea of emotions he wasn't equipped to navigate. Tears streamed down his face, each one a testament to the shattered image of his family. The reality of his parents' separation was a heavy burden, one that felt too immense for his young heart to bear. Realizing the depth of their collective pain, the family sought the help of a therapist. This decision marked the beginning of a challenging but necessary journey towards understanding and healing. Together, they navigated the complexities of their feelings, the therapist guiding them with gentle questions and encouraging words, helping to mend the rifts with truth and empathy. In time, Stephen made the difficult decision to move out, believing it would bring clarity and peace to their situation. This change, though hard at first, gradually led to a new sense of normalcy for Connor. The absence of daily tensions made room for healing, and slowly, the family began to find their way forward, each in their own space, but always connected at heart. The ink dried on the divorce papers, marking the end of Connor's parents' marriage. This official act sealed what had been reality for some time, forever altering the structure of their family. Yet, amidst the legal formalities, there was an unspoken understanding that this was a step towards healing, a necessary conclusion to a chapter filled with too much unsaid and undone. In the weeks that followed, Connor noticed the light return to his mother's eyes. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, revealing the joy that had been buried under years of strain. This change reassured Connor that despite the pain of the past, the decision to part ways was leading them towards brighter days. Therapy sessions became Connor's safe haven, a place where he could unravel his feelings and fears. With each visit, he peeled away layers of confusion and hurt, gradually understanding the complexity of his family's situation. This journey through his emotions made him stronger, more empathetic, and ready to face the world with a newfound resilience. The rift between Connor and his father once seemed insurmountable, but forgiveness paved the way for reconciliation. Connor learned to see his father not just as the man who made a grave mistake, but as a human capable of change and regret. Together, they embarked on the slow process of rebuilding their bond, discovering that love can endure even through the deepest of wounds. The plan Connor and Max had concocted, born out of a moment of pain and desperation, became a symbol of their past. As they looked at the drawing, a vivid reminder of what was, they realized it no longer held power over them. With a mutual understanding, they let it go, a gesture symbolic of moving forward, leaving the shadows of yesterday behind as they stepped into the light of tomorrow. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.